We're talking with Tom Morphet here in Haines, Alaska. Now, Tom has recently been a member of the Borough Assembly, and he was also the
Editor
of the newspaper, the operator, owner of the newspaper, and he's lived here for quite a while. He does all kinds of fun things with people. He plays
marching band.
Marching band, yeah, that's right.
Another thing we started out.
And they've also been in our Lust for Dust show and various other shows, and you know, he's a pretty interesting guy.
Because Haines has always been something of a mutt in a lovable kind of way, a lovable mutt. You know, that we have all kinds of people here, and we don't always get along, but it makes it, and that's many travel writers have said Haines is the quintessential Alaska town because it's got, you know,
we used to call it the real Alaska.
The real Alaska, because you have the loggers and the fishermen living with the professionals from down south and the artists that grew up here and the native people. So we have all types in Haines.
Yeah.
And the question is, will the future look the same? I think, you know, the town has segregated itself in terms of the folks, people of different political persuasions. And, you know, we're very rarely threatened by people that we know well, even when they hold differing political views. And the truth is that these waves of succession that brought, say, your parents here, and then after the war, there's many servicemen besides your parents came to Alaska. They'd seen Alaska here. There was another wave that came with the tank farm in the Cold War. There was a wave of people that came after the oil. You know, there's a wave of people came from Oregon. If you think of a family, and then you have, say you had your family, then you adopted a couple children. That's going to change your family quite a bit. Your family dynamics, the relative peace or routine in your household. Haines is like a family of all adopted children. You know, we lack a lot of basic commonality, and so that's going to make the town more interesting, but also more combative, and a bit more friction. And the question, I think, is what comes from, what dynamics can grow, what positive dynamics can grow from that friction.
Right.
And I think that's the town's greatest challenge, is for these different people who've arrived here at different stages, from different backgrounds, to try to build some trust with people who are very different. And you said, you know, we have to bring people around to understanding that there's money in the arts. I think that the greater challenge is we just have to spend enough time with each other that we're not threatening to each other. And that's why I love Pizza Joe. I think Pizza Joe has been a godsend to this town because he has helped us make fun of ourselves.
Uh-huh.
And that humor, finding fault in ourselves enough to laugh about ourselves, is the first step towards finding something good in our diversity.
Well, and this is what the Peace Frontier video hopes to accomplish, in a sense, is both making fun of ourselves and also exploring in depth these frontier frictional experience here, because I mean we are right here on the front lines of development versus culture or you know, history, etc. But you know, it's a battleground in a sense, and the way that I think that we should be dealing with it in any case is to be having more communication, more meetings, more you know, we did some forums on tourism and one thing or another at the Chilkat Center, and you know, these are people reacted well to that kind of a thing. We just didn't carry it on to the extreme, but you know.
Yeah, no, but the key is I think, and we've had some of those. We've had over the years. There was the Haines 2005. You might remember that process. In 1995, people said, "What do you want here to be here in 2005, 10 years from now?" And people said some things like a community garden, and we did get a community garden.
Mm-hmm.
And the other people said, well, cheaper energy. And what do you know? Around that same time, we got off diesel for the town, and we got onto hydro. So the town does progress, and anytime, you're exactly right, anytime you can bring differing people, people with differing personalities and views together in one room, you stand a chance, and particularly in a neutral setting, not a charged political setting.
Right.
If you can bring people of differing views together, that you at least build trust. You build some collegiality.
Right.
You build some, okay, that guy might be okay. I just spent an hour with him, and he didn't make my blood boil. and
Surprise.
And then I think that's because otherwise you just have, you know, the educated people or the liberal people going off in one direction. You have to bring in, and I applaud your efforts to do that at the Chilkat Center, and as an assembly person, to try to bring in these different folks to get them on board. Yeah. But man, it's what happens, I think, unfortunately, is that while we're trying to bring things together or people together, we have these other things that pop up, like the harbor project, say, or the logging proposal. And they just kind of drive us back into our separate camps.
Right.
And but things like the state fair and the lighting of the fort, you see people there that, you know, maybe are from a different church, or maybe you don't go to church and there's church people there. The arts has the potential. I'm thinking like of the Holly Jolly Follies. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost been taken over by the churches, and that's not a bad thing. You know, because so the theater people get to meet with the church people, and the arts has the potential of bringing together people from different socioeconomic backgrounds in one place. And maybe that's where you start to build a little bit of trust. Like, hey, we're just doing the play, or we're just doing the follies, we're just doing the fireworks, we're just doing the lighting of the fort. Isn't that something we can all...
Common ground.
You got it. But this idea for the Peace Fort, I think, will probably immediately hit opposition because it has the word peace in it.
Right.
You know?
Well, I've already experienced that.
Right. Well,
but then there's other people who say, "Oh my God, this is so great," you know.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I see the potential of it, but because we have the Chilkat Center, mm-hmm. and this is a great studio for lectures, seminars, workshops, conferences. All kinds of things that could happen there, and then be broadcast on the channel to mm-hmm. the rest of the world. And if the rest of the world is watching, then you actually have an audience, you know. Mm-hmm. And you know, we can deal with various aspects of human interaction. Is basically what we're talking about, because that's who's doing the wars is humans, and humans are getting kicked in the butt here and there and trod upon, and it's been that way forever. Why can't we embrace some kind of different way of thinking? I mean, we can't just always live in the past. We have to move forward into some new vision for the future. And that requires, of course, some imagination on the part of ourselves, you know, like, okay, if we're not going to do the same old, well, then what is it? And so then we really have to sit down and talk to ourselves and say, hey, you know, what if, you know, that something like this could happen, and then, you know, everybody's going to tell us why not, but then you got to continue on somehow. You got to persevere and show them that in fact mm-hmm. it's possible and it'll be worthwhile.
Well, I think one of the problems is that peace is boring. You know, I've been to peace rallies. You know, it's almost like going to a funeral, you know. and the most successful peace effort I was ever involved with was a party when I was in college called the Drink for Peace. And it was this huge drunk Motown party. And we called it the Drink for Peace. And in the toilet, we had this little MX missile. It was when Ronald Reagan was talking about winning a limited nuclear war. And the nuclear freeze movement was very powerful because you had people, the leader of the country was talking about, and his advisors were saying, listen, we can just lob some small nukes over into East Germany and win a limited nuclear war. And so anyway, I was in school in Wisconsin, which is a big drinking state. Drinking age was 18. And, I'd go to these peace rallies, and everybody would be holding their cross and their candle and singing down by the riverside. And it was terribly boring. And I would say that, if you want the peace fort to take off, you have to have humor, you have to have motion, you have to have loud rock and roll music,
color,
you have to have fun.
Fun.
It's got to be fun.
Fun. That's
and
right.
that because people respond to fun,
Yeah.
and that's why they respond to Joe. When Joe was out on the stage at the fairgrounds making fun of, I think his brilliant piece that would be great to get on the air was the heli ski goat opera. And he made fun of the environmentalists who were worried about the goats, and he made fun of the heli skiers who wanted, their soul was free when they're up there in the pristine goat habitat. And he made fun of both sides, and both sides sat in the audience and laughed at themselves. So, I think that it's got your best. The way to bring peace is to make people laugh.
Well,
and to
that's
take
what it's
away.
all about
Yeah,
here, for sure. If we can
And-
get some humor, we get some stories, we get some interactions, and then of course I think in the summertime we should be dressed up in wacko uniforms, that show that we're members of the Peace Fort, and that then it's. The idea is to have fun and look goofy and say interesting things, So.
Well, I remember when there was when Gail would dress up as a can girl and with Raymond in his eagle outfit.
Yeah.
And that was a little signature, it added a little color.
Yeah.
And Joe in his bear suit and you're right. It's almost like you want to strategically plant these little seeds of subversive art around town, and I think we kind of edge there with like some of the murals around town. There, we're kind of moving in that direction towards a more town consciousness of the value of art with the First Fridays at the art thing, but. How that becomes transformational is and how you build on that is
the challenge.
Is the challenge. There's such a relative lack of manpower and resources in a town this small that you would need to reach that vision would take the whole town to get on board.
Or we need some new talent, or people to come in to do that kind of a thing.
But just for the infrastructure, I mean, we have an Eagle Festival that struggles because the whole town hasn't bought into the Eagle Festival. We get the Eagles for free. Yeah. And what was that town in Washington State that they made into a Bavarian? It's like this little town in Bavaria.
Yeah.
It was. Anyway, its name will escape me. They decided in the 50s, they were a little struggling town up in the mountains. They were going to redo the whole town in this Bavarian theme. And you drive up there, it's uncanny. Because you drive in there and there's all the architecture and the people with the lederhosen. And they've basically turned their town into this fake Bavarian city. And people flock to it. And it's been a success. And that took the Chamber of Commerce and everybody in town saying, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to change all these buildings and make them look like the ones that are in Switzerland.
So what happened to them in the end?
I think that's still a success.
But
what's the name of the town?
Too much of a success that nobody can deal with it.
Everybody signed on to that, and certain architecture you have to have, and kind of the same idea as the fort. When you're building the fort, it's got to be a certain architecture, but it's the whole damn town. Yeah. And that's. I mean, I think I've been here long enough to know that just pulling off a parade, these things are you know, there are a lot of effort for a small town.
Yeah, for sure.
I grew up in a town of 30,000 the size of Juneau, and it doesn't have as many events as Haines does,
Really?
with 30,000 people. So
I
and
think,
it's the
you know, I
camp
think Skagway, even with smaller towns, has more events.
has more events than we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And Skagway, I mean, to its credit, Skagway started with tourism only a few years after the gold rush. They were already cashing in.
Yeah, it's
On
been a
that.
perpetual gold rush in the Skagway forever.
Yeah, and they've learned many of the tricks. And then the other thing I think that we have to remember with Skagway is that everybody in the town is in the same industry. So it's very easy. It's like it would be like comparable to a dairy town in Wisconsin. Everybody there is on the same program. So when there's a question of, do we want to do build this building, or do we want to build this port? If all the dairy farmers are for it, the town is for it. In Skagway, if it's good for tourism, it's good for Skagway. And if it's not good for tourism, so you're once you have a monolithic culture like that and only one main industry, it's very easy to come to consensus,
Right.
and relatively speaking, than it is in a town where some people want this, some people want that. There's a big native population that kind of wants what they had historically, and I think towns like Haines, like Wrangell, I think Haines much more like Wrangell. They struggle because they have those competing interests. I think part of the effort of the Peace Fort should be at least preserving the spirit of that time when this was far-flung Alaska, and you had to make your own entertainment.
Well, and that we could do with if we have a summer camp, a summer arts camp, or a skills camp, where you actually learn how to point a foundation or renovate a room, or you do some theater work, you do some art projects, you learn how to sew or to carve or do metal sculpting or whatever it is that you want to do. And we actually have the abilities at some point in time to do that, because we have the facilities here at the fort. They just need to be renovated to the point where they're actually usable.
That's a great idea. I mean, and have those for, like, Alaska Indian Arts train kids in native carving to take your idea and bring adults here and teach adults a little bit of carving.
Well,
teach
exactly.
adults.
Adults meaning like anywhere over 18 in a sense.
Sure.
Somewhere where we don't have to be totally responsible.
Sure, sure. And look at Lane Canal Players. Now they have a theater camp. You could have an adult theater camp.
Yes.
And as a way to try to give people, one thing people will travel for is learn new things.
Yeah.
Donna Katati has her portrait painting thing for a week, and people come up from Seattle and Juneau because they're in Haines and they're living in this beautiful place and they're learning how to paint portraits.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're dead on that there are opportunities there. You just have to build the whole program. Today we're learning carving, tomorrow we're learning oil painting, the next day we're going to go hiking. Certainly that you could build a curriculum, take a more sophisticated program to bring people, to have people dig into their pockets to pay to come here for.
So thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tresham.
I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think any dialogue towards creating new things in town is worthwhile.
Okay.
Thanks.